How to have too much money problems. In this episode of the Bill Hauser podcast, we're going to be talking about how to solve money problems by looking at the foundational truths of what actually is money, the scientific process to making more money, and we're going to break it all down. So I want to first start with what is money. I look at it as three different things. Number one is a medium of exchange. So if you look at, how things were hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we did barter, right? We traded goods and services, and that was super inefficient, right? Because if I traded a cow for a donkey, and I didn't need a cow, then, I'd have to barter for something else to get what I actually need. So by introducing a accepted form of payment or a medium of exchange like money, it allowed us to more efficiently transact with a centralized medium of exchange. Number two is money is a unit of account, okay? So money provides a common measure in which prices and debts are expressed, right? Providing the availability of economic calculation, okay? So it's a unit of account, okay? And it allows us to express the value of something through it, okay? Which leads to the third point. It is a storage of value, okay? So it retains some purchasing power over time, though it is most times subject to inflation and rarely to deflation. Okay, so we're going to break down these three and some principles that are within them: medium of exchange, unit of account, storage of value. Okay, I want to start with why storage of value inherent in the fact that money depreciates over time in most cases. Why most people get money wrong, right, is because they don't understand the concept that money is a storage of value. However, money goes down in value, right? Now, money is also a medium of exchange where you can exchange money for something of more value, right? This is why people who reinvest in their companies, their business, themselves to create more value from the existing value of money tend to get wealthier than those who just let their money sit around, right? So if money loses value over time, and money is a storage of value, right, but it's also a medium of exchange, then if we store all of our money as value and just let it sit there in a bank account, right, and we don't exchange the value of money for something more of value, whether that's a skill that we want to learn. Let's say we spend money on a coach, mentor, educational program, book. We spend money on learning a piece of information to then sharpen a skill of ours. We've now spent current value, i.e. money, for future value, right? And we've used it as a medium of exchange in that circumstance. So my invitation is that those who learn the money game and can eventually deserve to have too much money problems have learned to use it as a medium of exchange, not a storage of value, okay? So we have to get really good at using money as a medium of exchange rather than a store of value, okay? So then that comes to how do we exchange our services and our value to the marketplace in a way that collects us a lot of money? And then once we get money, how do we exchange money for more money, right? Sometimes people think it takes money to make money. It's completely false. That's why the majority of self-made millionaires are self-made, which means they didn't have the money to start with. They exchanged courage and a skill set for money, okay? And then they took the money that they earned from exchanging courage plus skill set. They've taken that money and then reinvested it into things that eventually, whether directly or indirectly, produce more money, right? Now, your money can either capture value, okay? So you can either capture value by exchanging courage plus your skill set, right? So you can capture value in money, right, as you provide value in courage and skills, right? So we have to get good at the value exchange if we want to make a lot of money, okay? Both how we exchange value, okay, A, and then B, once we've exchanged our value to someone, how do we then collect money for that exchange of value, okay? So we're going to break this down on how, the process that I use and that many successful people use to get their money right. But the first thing that we have to talk about is your money story, okay? So I think one of the most important questions no one asks when it comes to why you're not making the money that you think you should be making is your money story, right? What was your first memory of money, right? What was your first memory of money? And what was your most painful memory of money? These are two extremely powerful questions, right? So if your first memory of money was your mom or dad went to the grocery store when you were young, bought all these groceries, cooked dinner, and then got really pissed off if you didn't finish your dinner because you were wasting food, right? That's kind of a relationship to money experience, right? Where your family was operating from a place of scarcity to where if you didn't eat your entire dish, they felt like they were wasting money, right? Or maybe one of your first experiences was, remembering one time when your parents were super stressed out about money, right? Most times our first memories of money were not necessarily positive ones, right? So understanding my first memory of money was, and answering that question for yourself. And then my most painful memory around money was, for me, that's super simple. It's when my family went bankrupt back in 2008 and everything that we owned got repossessed. We had to, our house got repossessed. Every car we had got repossessed, everything. I mean, we went completely under. And for me, that was one of the greatest lessons I ever learned was my family was really a victim to money, right? And they were not in control of their money. Instead, their money was controlling them. And I know for me, that painful experience around money drove a lot of my desire to create wealth for myself because I never wanted to feel that way ever again. So we have to map our money story out. We have to think about what are the childhood themes we learned as a kid? What was the most kind of painful lesson we ever learned about money, right? And then that's your past money story, but then also what's your future money story going to look like? How much money are you going to create? What's it going to feel like when you create that much money for yourself, for your family, for your legacy? If you run a business, how are you going to shower your team with more money? How are you going to make everyone around you wealth magnets as you become your own wealth magnet? Really map out that money story, both from how did you get to where you are now from your past and where are you taking yourself in the future, and get really clear on that, right? And be very aware of the core beliefs that pop up when you start mapping out your money story, which is the next step, is look at your core beliefs and trust the fact that you can change them, right? So if you've ever had a core belief, let's say that you map out your money story and you say, I want to be, millions of dollars in the bank or whatever. Well, if you have an underlying belief that rich people are greedy, or, I'm not a numbers person, or, I can't manage my finances well, or, money is the root of all evil, or, money doesn't grow on trees, or whatever, these things that you learned when you were a kid, you're going to have to confront them and truthfully look at whether or not these are true statements, and whether or not you're going to be willing to let these statements drive your entire life. Because here's the truth. In business, your money beliefs, and in your career, your money beliefs are going to drive how much money you make, right? One common denominator I've found is how much you believe a lot of money is will ultimately result in how much money you take home, right? If you think $60,000 is a lot of money, right, you're probably not going to take home much more than $60,000, right? If you think $10 million is a lot of money, you're probably not going to take, much more home than that, right? So we have to expand our belief of what a lot of money is, right? So that we become desensitized to that next level of money creation that we want to create in ourselves, our lives, our businesses, right? Every limiting belief, okay, can be turned into an empowerment phrase or an empowerment counterpart, right? So we basically look at, okay, let's say we think rich people are greedy. Well, first you have to disprove that in your own mind. Prove to yourself, go on ChatGPT, show how many rich people, look up all the rich people, people who are making over, $100 million a year, and add up how much those people have given to charity, and then compare it to how much everyone combined has given to charity who's made under $100 million, right? And what you're going to find is like this belief that rich people are greedy. It's probably not so true, because you're going to see that the majority of the money given to charity is from rich people, right? And going towards very important needs. So there's ways to disprove this and to turn it into an empowering phrase. Instead of saying rich people are greedy, rich people are givers, right? And turn this into an empowering phrase, right? Rich people are givers. Why? Because clearly rich people are giving more value to the marketplace, and therefore they're getting more value back. Clearly, rich people are giving more to charities, right? So therefore, rich people are givers, rich people are not greedy, right? As an example. So we can take any of these limiting beliefs that hold us back around money, whether it's what we think a lot of money is, what we think about rich people, et cetera, and we can turn them on their head by disproving them, right? And all of this just requires a little bit of reframing around abundance-minded thinking, right? So how do I talk myself into abundance thinking? How do I eject myself from a world where I think it's kind of winner take all, right? Or zero sum gain, right? How do I eject myself from that line of thinking? How do I start thinking that when I make more money, I'm going to allow other people to make more money, right? How do I make it stop feeling like guilty about how much money I make, and rather I'm going to be able to shower so much wealth upon other people that it's my duty to make more money, right? So that's like kind of that reframing around empowerment phrases, but also abundance thinking, like thinking not in either ors, but yes ands when it comes to money, and everyone can win, right? If you make more money, it's awesome for everyone around you, because they're going to be able to make more money. They're going to be able to surround themselves with you and learn how you made more money so that they can go make more money, right? So I think that this abundance mindset is lacking, and most people think, the opposite of abundance is scarcity, and they think if I make more money, I'm taking something from someone else, right? And it's just not the case, at least in my belief system. And I highly recommend that you adopt a abundance mindset that it's not a zero-sum game. We can just rise the tide of everyone, right? Everyone can be more successful together. And once we are in this abundance mindset, we then have to go back to the rule of using money as a tool of exchange rather than a store of value. So this leads to my next point, which is money is your growth engine, not cost reduction, right? So current, okay, is rooted with the word currency, right? So the more your money moves like a current, the more money you make, right? If you ever look up a stat on how many transactions Amazon makes per day, let me just look this up real quick. How many transactions per day on Amazon? Yeah, it's freaking crazy. Amazon processes 12.87 million orders per day in the US, which translates to 536,000 orders per hour, or 8,900 orders per minute, okay? That is a freaking economy, okay? That is absolutely insane. But if you think about it like this, the Amazon effect, as we'll call it, is a methodology in which you can learn a lot. The Amazon effect, as I call it, like currency and current, right, are two and the same things. And we need to move our money like the current, right, very frequently in order to make a lot of money. Okay. So if you think about Amazon, Amazon is the middleman for 12 point whatever million transactions a day. Amazon is its own current, its own financial ecosystem, and it gets a cut of every sale that's made on Amazon because money is being used so much through Amazon's platform. There's a higher likelihood that Amazon can make money when there's so many transactions running through Amazon, right? So we have to use our money, not let it sit still. Just like Amazon is dealing with 12 million credit cards from people per day, right? We are controlling the flow of money in some ways. We're creating our own current. We then earn more currency, right? So we have to use money as a growth engine, okay? We have to understand that everything reflects onto its own kind, okay? So you don't get what you want, you get what you are, okay? If you're in sales, okay, as an example, or you run a business, and you are super skittish to buy something, let's say that every time you go to buy something, you need to think about it, or you have second thoughts, or you're indecisive. Let's say that you're a salesperson and you're sitting across from a prospect. Well, if you need to think about it every single time that you buy a product or service, it's more likely that when you sell your products and services to the market, the person on the other end is going to reciprocate that behavior that you live, and they're going to have to think about it, right? Because everything reflects onto its own kind, right? You don't get what you want, you get what you are. So if you are a buyer, I am a buyer, right? When I hear a sales pitch, there's a very high chance that I'm going to buy. And therefore, I have attracted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of buyers for my company because it reflects onto its own kind. It's not a big deal for me to make a $50,000 to $100,000 purchase decision. Therefore, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients who make $50,000 to $100,000 purchase decisions from my company, every single month, right? So in order to attract more buyers and attract more money, we have to be more of a buyer and more of the type of person who will attract the people who will buy our stuff, right? The next kind of extension of this is like understanding it's not your money, right? Like we get so possessive about money. We think like when we have a certain amount of money, it's my money, right? But it's really not, right? It was printed by, the federal treasury and these little, printed paper bills. Actually, 97% of currency is now digital, right? So it's actually only 3% of capital out there in the market is actual cash. I think it may be actually much less than that now, from when I last read that stat. It's not your money, right? Like, let's be honest here. It was created by the federal government as a means of exchange. Some people provide more value and receive more money. You temporarily hold on to that money for a period of time, right? And some people invested in houses. Some people invested in their business, their personal development. But it's a means of exchange, right? And I like looking at it as it's not my money. This is the federal government's money, right? I have a certain amount of it right now in my temporary possession. My job is to trade what's in my temporary possession for more in the future, right? And as soon as I started adopting this it's not my money belief, it made me much less possessive around it and allowed me to use it more as a tool. The next thing I want to talk about is that vision cures all limiting money beliefs. So like when it comes to investing in a business, I remember the first time I hired a one-on-one coach for my business, $50,000 wired cash up front to this business coach. And I didn't even think for a millisecond about doing it. Wired 50 grand up front to this business coach. And first time I did it, it was easy for me to do because I had a vision of where I wanted to go. At that point in time, my business did like, I don't know, 4 million or so the year before. I wanted to bring it to $10 million in the next year. I knew I didn't have the skills to deserve to grow my company that quickly. So I needed to learn from someone who had already done that. So it was easy for me to spend $50,000 in order to learn how to add $6 million to my income, right? And I followed that same practice every single time I've ever hit a roadblock in scaling my company now to, we'll do close to $50 million combined this year. So it is a very important principle to understand that if you have a big vision for where you're going, it's easy to spend money to get there. But if you're not clear on where you're going, you hoard your money, you hold on to it, right? Because you don't see the upside. I call it the upside math, right? If I'm going to spend money now to make $1 million back, like how much of that $1 million will you invest now in order to deserve to make that $1 million? For me, I'll take that bet every day of the week, right? So having a big vision of where you're going and what you want to improve on in every facet of your life makes it much easier to invest money rather than let it sit. Focus on the top line, then the bottom line, okay? This is another very important principle. This is more of a business principle, but oftentimes, people focus too much on the bottom line too early. Give you an example. If someone runs a business and that business is doing $10,000 a year, right? You can only profit up to $10,000. Okay, if a business is doing $10,000 a year, your profit potential is only $10,000. But hear me out on this. If your business is doing $10,000 a year, okay, the only way that you would profit $10,000 a year is if you did everything yourself, right? Which means, you're going to have to work personally to produce all that $10,000 in profit, right? Which means you'd have no expenses, your business would be 100% profit. So sometimes people prematurely focus on profit rather than scaling your top line revenue so that you can then optimize your expenses later and profit more in the future. So in my first 7 years in business, I only focus on growing the top line. And then once we got to multiple 8 figures in revenue, okay, then we started focusing on the bottom line. But I don't regret it for a second because since I focused so heavily on the top line, we got our business to a relatively big size. So then in 6 months of focusing on profits, we were able to take it to extremely profitable because through expense optimization, pricing optimization, et cetera, we were very quickly able to optimize the bottom line of the business because we had so much top line revenue. So focus on the top line first, then the bottom line. Get mad about the opposite stuff, I always say. If you used to get mad when you spend too much money on something, get mad about the fact that you used to think that was too much money, right? So get mad about the opposite stuff. Most people, when they make big purchases to benefit their lives, it's a stressful experience. I want you to get not mad at the fact that you're making a big purchase to advance your life. Get mad about the opposite stuff. Get mad at the fact that you thought that was a lot of money, right? So let's say you want to hire a personal trainer for $10,000 to get you in the best shape of your life, right? And you're hesitant about that and you're pissed that that person's charging 10 grand. It's too expensive. That person must be greedy. That's one way to get mad about it. The other way to get mad about it is to get mad at yourself for ever letting yourself think so small that you think $10,000 is a lot of money. So get mad about the opposite stuff, right? Spend time to get money and results, then spend money to buy time and results. In the beginning, most fortunes are built in the exchange of personal services, right? If you look at most fortunes, it's someone with a skill set and a little bit of courage goes out into the marketplace, exchanges those skills for money. You exchanged your time to get money and results for your business, right? And then once you get enough money from spending your time to get that money, then we have to then spend that money to buy our time and buy results, right? This is why I think passive income is premature for a lot of people, is you need to spend a lot of time on your craft in order to make a lot of money in the first part. Then once you get to, $5-10 million cash in the bank, then it's really easy to do passive income strategies, right? Because you have way more capital, right? To then get more passive income from it, right? But if you have $5,000 in the bank, how much passive income could you possibly get on a $5,000 investment? Almost none, right? So I think it's perfectly fine to carve out, 3, 5, 7, even 10 years of your life where you're going to put in the time, with the understanding that at some point in time, you're going to transition to then reinvesting your money to buy back your time and buy results. Last thing I want to hit on this is money is commitment. Okay? Money is commitment. Okay? It's a sign of commitment. The heart follows the pocketbook, right? When we spend more money on something, it shows our subconscious mind, our conscious mind, that I am committed to getting a result around this thing, right? Commitment feels great, okay? When we commit to something that's bigger than us, it feels great. So why doesn't spending money feel great for most people? It should feel great, right? But so many people have buyer's remorse, right? Which is basically doubt around spending money, right? What if we look at money as simply a reflection of our commitments, right? If we're more committed to something, we will spend more money on that thing. So if we're more committed to our health, we will spend more money on our health, right? If we're more committed to our business, we will spend more money advancing our skills and advancing our business, right? But what if we just look at money as just literally a reflection of what we're committed to? This is why I always say, look at your transaction history, okay, for the last 90 days. If I were to tell you what you're committed to, I would ask for an export of your bank statements for the last 3 months, both personal and business bank statements. I would analyze your expenses, and then I would report back to you, hey, based on where you're spending money, this is where it seems that you're committed, right? And if where you're spending money doesn't align with what your real vision and where you really want to take your life and business, then it means there's a misalignment that needs to be fixed, because we need to spend money and we need to spend time in direct proportion to what's most important to us in order to live a aligned life, right? But if we spend money and time on the things that aren't most important to us, over time, that's going to build up, that's going to take us off track, that's going to cause distraction, and ultimately it's going to result in us not getting the outcomes and results that we want out of our life. The ultimate best bet is always to double down on yourself and double down on your business. Then we do passive investments afterwards, okay? So doubling down on yourself is the number one asset of all assets that you should use money to do, okay? Sharpening your skills, sharpening your abilities, sharpening your knowledge so that you make less mistakes in business and less mistakes in life. That's why I always think if I'm confused on where to spend money, I'm first going to spend it on myself, right? If certain athletes spend $2 million a year on their body because they respect themselves that much to do that, right? Then I am not ignorant enough to think that I don't need to spend as much on myself to be an athlete in my business or an athlete in my life, right? So the best bet is to double down on yourself and to double down on your business. Your business is the only thing where you can get unlimited ROI. I mean, and you can control it, right? And it is a travesty how many business owners underinvest in their own business and look at shiny object syndrome, right? That's why, like, whenever people say I run 5 companies, I am like, okay, great. That's fine if each of those 5 companies are big enterprises and you truly hit a market cap, you hit a limit in terms of how much you could scale the company, and then you had to go and create a separate company. But most times that's distraction when you run multiple companies. We need to reinvest in our core business, the core thing that's making us the most money, so much again and again and again and again until we truly can't grow it any bigger. Then we start investing in other businesses. Then we start investing in passive investments, okay? Let's say a passive income investment can get you a 10% return per year, okay? If your business only grows 10% per year, okay, there's a problem. Because if you put all of your time and money and effort and learning and know-how and knowledge towards scaling your company, you're going to grow it way faster than 10% per year, especially if you're a small business. Okay, we have clients of ours that grow their businesses 300% in 1 year. So every dollar that someone who can grow their business 300% per year, every dollar that that person spends in their business versus spends in something like the stock market, where you can only grow maybe on average 10% per year. Let's just use a clean round number. Okay, the opportunity cost. Okay, the opportunity cost is 30 times what you invested in the stock market, because you could have invested that money that you invested in the stock market into your own business and gotten a 300% return on it, right? So that's why I always put passive income last, investing in yourself first, investing in your business second, because investing in yourself gives you the skills to then deserve to scale your business. Scaling your business then gives you the money to then have excess money to then reinvest in passive income investments, okay? So bottom line here is, I want, if you're listening to this right now, I want you to have too much money problems, not too little money problems. And it's a good problem to have too much money. And you can have that problem if you use money as a medium of exchange, okay? If you map your money story, if you identify the core beliefs that are holding you back around money, right? And you reframe those into empowering phrases rather than limiting beliefs, right? And we start operating from a place of abundance. We realize, it's not a zero-sum game. We are able to, as we get wealthy, we're able to help other people get wealthy. We're able to rise the tide in our community. We're able to give back more, right? We take that abundance belief and then we use it to create a faster money current in our life, right? That transaction volume that Amazon has, where money in, money out real quick, right? So that we're able to kind of create our own economy, right? And we become the person that we want to buy from us, right? Everything reflects onto its own kind. We realize it's not our money, okay? We realize that the size of my vision will cure a lot of my limiting money beliefs. We focus on scaling the top line revenue, right? And we start spending time unapologetically to buy money and results. And then we use our excess money to go buy our time back and then buy results in the future. And we look at money as commitment, okay? And we look at where we spend our money as a reflection of what we're committed to. And all of this leads to, I'm going to exchange money. I'm going to use it as a method of exchange, not a store of value. And I am going to reinvest, like my life depends on it, first in myself, second in my business, and third in passive investment streams, in that order, okay? And I promise you, if you follow these principles, you start adopting these thinking modalities, you're going to have too much money problems. And congrats, because it's a great problem to have. I'll see you in the next episode.